With some breakups, it's easy to understand what happened. With other breakups, though, it's kind of like, what the hell just happened? Kind of like my last breakup. Forget trying to understand the breakup. I was trying to understand the relationship. I'm going to get to how I understood, but come back with me for a while into the relationship so we can understand why I couldn't understand in the first place. One of the many things that made it difficult was that my ex was always giving me the silent treatment, and he didn't really communicate what the problems were that he was having with me. And I was in this relationship because I loved him, so anytime that something was wrong, I wanted to know, but I think his style of dealing with things was to just be by himself and kind of sit on his emotions, which I don't really think really solved any problems, but it made it hard for me to understand how can I even help him. Usually the silent treatment just kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't have any clue as to why it started, and then it would resolve equally the same. It would just all of a sudden be lifted, and I didn't know what did I do or not do that all of a sudden lifted the silent treatment. Anybody who's been given the silent treatment by somebody that they love and deeply care for knows that it really does a number on your head. When I would get the silent treatment, I was trying to figure it out because I wanted to get things back to the way that they were. I like the good parts of a relationship. I like the affection. I like the kissing, and I like spending time together and all of that. So when all of that started being withheld from me, obviously I didn't like it. It's normal to not like it. That's how our bodies react when people pull away. So I really, really wanted to understand, why is this happening? And is there something that I can change? I know that maybe shame and guilt aren't the best emotions, but if there was something he was trying to communicate to me with this silence, then I wanted to figure it out. It felt like I could never understand why, though. Why did he pull away from me? Why did he behave the way that he did? Why was this happening? It made me feel like maybe I was a bad person, or a bad boyfriend at least, or there was something wrong with our relationship, or maybe there was something wrong with him. I know there's nothing wrong with people, but I just couldn't figure out why. Why was this happening? That was the question. It really didn't help either that whenever the silent treatment was lifted, it was just back to normal. Nothing ever changed, nothing happened. So it was obvious to me that I didn't do anything differently. I would try, believe me, I would try to send emails and talk to him and do whatever I could, give him his space and everything, but none of that seemed to make a difference. But then all of a sudden things would change. So that contradiction of not knowing why it was happening and then not knowing why things changed, that made it hard to understand. And there was also that weird feeling when we would sometimes be in the middle of a silent treatment that he was giving me, and we would go out with friends, and then all of a sudden it's the silent treatment didn't exist anymore, and he was talking to me again. And then sometimes even when we were done with whatever we were going out to do, he would go back to the silent treatment. So it was okay, what now? Right before we broke up, I had gotten us to see another therapist. We had been seeing a therapist from something earlier in the relationship when he cheated on me, and that therapist was not very helpful. I thought I would get some understanding from her, but not so much. She gave us some tools that we could use to work on things, and that was great because that was something that we needed, but it wasn't enough. And frankly, my ex wasn't using those tools. I would go home from the sessions and I would work on things and I would change my behavior, but my ex didn't. And really, she was missing an important part of the puzzle that I needed to understand what was going on. And for me and for our relationship, that was something that the new therapist seemed to understand. She brought it up right away within a couple of sessions of seeing her, which was trauma. My ex and I had both gone through a lot of stuff in our past, and it's clear that that stuff was coming into our relationship now. It wasn't so obvious without being pointed out to us, but once that therapist pointed it out to me and I thought about things and really worked on things, everything made sense. But it didn't make sense right away, and there were things that I needed to do, and I'll give you some ideas of what I did to try to understand the breakup. One big problem that I had when it came to trauma is dissociation. Dissociation is kind of zoning out, not being fully present and not remembering things, and that was making it hard to really understand the dynamics of our relationship because half the time I couldn't remember. This is part of why things were so confusing for me, because I couldn't understand what was happening because half the time I couldn't remember what was happening. The dissociation was getting in the way. So once I knew that trauma was part of the problem, and once I learned about dissociation, I could start to cope with the trauma and cope with what I was going through, and then I was able to recall better what was happening. But I needed another tool. What I needed, and this is probably going to sound a little weird, and this was not something recommended by a therapist, but I needed to make a timeline of our relationship to really understand what was happening and why we were breaking up. I personally needed a record of things because I couldn't hold it in my memory. There was so much that had gone on and so much contradictory information and weird events in our relationship that I needed it written down with the dates. I'm really glad that I did this too, because it helped me uncover some things that I wouldn't have otherwise understood. For example, in the beginning of our relationship, a couple of years in, he had emailed me about not getting enough physical affection and not feeling loved in our relationship. And of course, I wanted to fix that, and I was glad he brought that to my attention. And that's pretty much what I told him when I responded to him, that I wanted to help make things better, and I'm sorry for anything that I've done that hurt him. What I didn't know, and I didn't know this because I didn't find this out until later, was that he cheated on me the next day, or at least he started to. And what this helped me to understand was that he was not going to give me a chance in this relationship. It didn't really matter what I did. He was going to take actions into his own hands. So all of that trying that I did, trying to get him into therapy and trying to work things out with him, because I wasn't blaming it all on him, but I was trying to work together with him, that wasn't going to do anything because he was dead set in his avoidance. Now, speaking of avoidance and trauma, I also spent a lot of time online learning new terms and learning about all these things that my therapist was kind of bringing to my attention. Since my ex was not participating, I figured I could still do better for my life and I could still improve myself and see if that has any effect, even though we were breaking up. And so I was online researching constantly, basically doing what you're doing now probably on YouTube, reading articles, everything to get my hands on information so I could learn. I think I really took away from all of this that it's important to understand what happened in your relationship, and it's important to have a context around it, especially if trauma was involved. Doesn't mean that's what happened in your relationship and your breakup, but I couldn't understand the breakup until I had some information and until I did the research and until I looked backwards and put things together. But I also was never going to put something together that was going to make him stop the breakup. That was his pattern throughout our relationship, and that was the way he was going to continue with the breakup. So I would say if you're somebody who's going through a breakup, don't spend all your time trying to figure out what's happening. I know that's important. I know you need that information, but don't lose yourself trying to understand, because there's a lot of things that I still don't understand. There are a lot of things that he did during the relationship and during the breakup and even after the breakup that I'm never going to have answers to unless he decides to, for some reason, tell me one day, but I don't even know if I could trust those answers. So as I've moved on from the relationship, I've just learned to get more comfortable with not understanding everything and being okay with that. What is it that you're trying to understand about your breakup? Let me know down below in the comments.